If you've tried your hand at managing your nonprofit's finances, then you know it's a bit nuanced. You know there are some tweaks and some things that are just different that small business owners don't have to worry about. And so in today's video, I am going to go over 3 things that you need to know that are paramount to managing your organization's finances the right way. So stay tuned. If you are new here, hello and welcome. My name is Jermaine and I am the owner, the founder of Visionary Accounting Group, where we let nonprofits focus on their mission while we focus on the numbers. And so we manage their accounting from A to Z. We manage the back-end financial operations. And today we're going to be talking about 3 things that you need to know about nonprofit accounting. So let's get into number 1. So when managing your nonprofit's finances, a lot of times the first thing we are, inundated with is like, where's the money coming from, right? But one of the things that we need to be thinking about is not only where does the funding come from, but is it restricted or not, right? So what that means is, has the donor, the giver, the funder designated where those funds are to be spent? Because if they have, we have to make sure that 1, we're tracking properly, we account for it on the financial statements properly, and that at any point, we know where those restricted funds lie. It is so common for organizations to not know where their restricted funds lie, which is a recipe for disaster. And honestly, it's also a reason to get your funding halted. So here at Visionary, what we do anytime an organization gets a grant, or maybe a new government contract, but if you are getting some significant funding or any type of funding that comes attached with stipulations, we want to see the agreement, right? We want to know, what does it say? Because a lot of times, there's verbiage in there that you might not be familiar with that we are, because we do this, right? We're the experts at this. And so we want to read the agreement. We want to know whether or not these funds are restricted or not, because also if they are restricted, we then need to know, okay, so what can it be spent on? Is it scholarships? I don't know, is it payroll? Like, what is it specifically, so that we can make sure that as part of our month-end process, we are capturing these items correctly. And this is why I say it's important to honestly have someone who keeps an eye on your finances for you, because a lot of times you're busy, right? You have a lot of things going on. And while you may be able to generally manage the finances, a lot of these nuances and these small things, right, you can't keep an eye on. And typically it's the small things that get you in trouble. All right, so point number 2, what you want to consider or know about nonprofit accounting is functional expenses. Too often I see clients get caught up in the chart of accounts. They want to have an account for everything, but they completely forget about the functional category, right? Where does this expense lie functionally, right? So functional expenses, there's 3. You have general admin, you have fundraising, you have programs. So outside of determining what chart of account category, this expense goes to, we also have to know what is the functionality of said expense. And it's not just because somebody told us to, right? There are a few reasons why this is important. First reason why it's important is that the IRS requires it. When you file your 990, you have to include your statement of functional expenses, right? So they want to see where expenses lie across these 3 categories. Point number 2, or reason number 2 why this is important, is that some funders actually in the agreement will require a certain percentage of these categories. So they may say you can only have 10% of your expenses fall in admin, or you can only have 20% fall in admin. So you need to know these things so that when you're reviewing your expenses on a monthly basis, you can see, right, where things lie. When you're spending, you're having these things top of mind. And so it's important to make sure you're tracking. And then lastly, you need to see, are you overly leveraged in any one area? There are times that we've caught errors by running the statement of functional activities on a monthly basis. And it's like, wow, admin seems really high, this past month. And then we realize, oh, maybe someone was incorrectly, put towards the admin category when they really should have been put towards programmatic. But if you're not paying attention to these things, if you're not looking for them, if you're not aware, then you're not going to find them, right? And it's not going to be something that's on your radar. So you have to be paying attention and you have to be tracking these things. So when we here at Visionary create a financial package for clients, every client gets a statement of functional expenses, because it doesn't matter what type of nonprofit you run, you have to get that report because you have to report on that. And part of what we do is we review it in detail so that, one, we can just make sure, right, that every expense is also tagged to a functionality, but also so that we can determine if there are any errors. And so in QuickBooks Online, we use the class feature to track the functionality, right? So those 3 functional expenses are tracked using classes. And, I have other videos where I go into detail, but if we want to get specific around, the types of programs, the names of the programs, the type or names of the fundraising events, we'll do that too. But at a very high level, you should have 3 classes in QuickBooks Online: general admin, fundraising, programmatic. There should not be an expense that ends up in non-specified, because every expense should have a functional category. Lastly, let's talk about the auditing process. So typically when you hear about audits, right, like a lot of times it's being mentioned in reference to like the IRS coming in and, going through all of your files and going through all of your receipts. And while that may be true from a small business standpoint, for nonprofits, it's a little bit different. So you don't pay federal taxes, right? So when you get audited, it's not like these auditors are coming in to see, like, did you report, all your income? Did you pay the right amount in taxes? No, they're coming in to see, do you have proper controls in place? Are they up to par, right? Are you compliant, right, with certain regulations? They're checking accountability, so to speak. And they want to know, are you using funds appropriately? Are you using funds as they have been intended? And so this goes back then to your foundation, to your bookkeeping foundation, to your month-end close, right? To your year-end close, to your processes around retaining documentation, maintaining segregation of duties, right? Like making sure that the entire finance and accounting process is solid, so that when you get audited, you're not getting dinged for not having certain things in place. Because the auditing process tends to be a little bit more, maybe a lot more thorough as it relates also to nonprofits, it's also important to make sure that you have a process for how you prepare, right? And I actually have an upcoming video where I'll talk about how we prepare for nonprofit audits. So if that is of interest to you, let me know down in the comments. You have to make sure, one, that you know the federal requirements, especially if you're managing federal funds, and also that you know the state requirements, because it does differ. And so this goes back to that whole knowing the regulations that apply to your organization and making sure that you are compliant, right? And making sure that you have the proper procedures in place. And that's why I say it's important to have someone that keeps an eye on your finances, right? Because again, as executive director, you're managing a lot of things. It is easy for a ball to drop. And typically the ball that drops is the ones that is not as important to your role, right? And so you're not the CFO, you're not the controller, right? You're not the bookkeeper, or you may kind of be, acting as bookkeeper because you're DIYing, but that's very dangerous for your organization and it is not sustainable. And so you want to make sure, especially if you've hit that threshold to where you have to be audited, that you are not the person that's managing your organization's finances, because at that point you should be hiring someone, and depending on how large you are, that someone may need to be a team. So those are the 3 things that you need to know when it comes to nonprofit accounting. It is not the only 3 things that you need to know. So let's be clear. I just gave you a little bit, right? But I hope that this video was helpful. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them below, and I will see you guys in the next video.